Hi, this is Dr. Tom Rogers coming to you today with our doctor's dictation. Today I'm going to talk about something near to me in my heart, diabetes, but more specifically type 2 diabetes. Type 1, like my two children, is not curable yet, but type 2 is reversible, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. A lot of doctors and dietitians, nutritionists, the World Health Organization, nobody realizes that it's a totally reversible disease, because when you get to the root cause of diabetes type 2, which is the vast majority of diabetes, 95% of diabetics are type 2, used to be called adult onset diabetes. But the root cause of that is one thing: carbohydrates. You take the carbs out, you can cure diabetes and reverse type 2 diabetes. It turns out that diabetes is a hormone problem, and that hormone is called insulin. Insulin is that hormone that's secreted from your pancreas that puts the sugar or carb sugar, same thing, that goes in your bloodstream from your food. It puts it into the cells for energy. And so what happens is, if you eat too many carbohydrates, it makes for too much insulin production. Insulin, as you know, is a fat-storing hunger hormone. So most diabetics have way too much insulin because they're type 2 diabetics. Type 1 diabetics have no insulin. That's why they're required to take shots from day one, or they wouldn't make it. So type 2 diabetes is a more insidious problem associated with terribly poor diets and obesity. You know, in my practice, half of what I do is hormonal, the other half is obesity related. And these two are, of course, go hand in hand. You don't see one without the other. So insulin, think about insulin. And the problem with it is that most patients have not received any correct counseling on diet or nutrition. I think only 13% of patients that are obese get any nutritional advice from their doctor. And then that nutritional advice most likely is eat less and exercise more, which doesn't work. And we've even the American Diabetic Association recommends that we eat 30 to 40 to 50 grams of carbohydrates with each meal. That's way too many carbohydrates. So what happens is, they're just promoting one medicine after another to bring your sugar down, then you eat to bring it back up. It's a vicious cycle. Why is it worse these days? We're seeing all these diabetics, we're seeing all these obese people. That's because really we recommend that most people eat too many carbohydrates. Back 30, 40 years ago, we put most Americans on a low-fat diet. Mistakenly, we thought that fat caused heart disease. Now we know it doesn't. In fact, there's not one study that shows fat causes heart disease. Now, there are worse kinds of fats than others, artificial fats, of course. But really, it's a problem with carbohydrate metabolism. So when you eat carbs, it increases your insulin, which causes you to crave more foods and to store more fats. It's really diabetes. Really, you can think of it as a state of carbohydrate toxicity, is the way I look at it. You can't get the blood sugar into the cells. So this ADA advice that you eat 40 to 50 carbs per day is way, way too much. So if you notice in the statements of the ADA, there's no statement on reversing diabetes. And you can absolutely reverse type 2 diabetes, even in patients that have been on insulin for their diabetes for years. I mean, first we started out with metformin, which is not a bad drug really for a lot of other reasons, and then we add other insulin sensitizers, or drugs that you can eliminate sugar through your urine or decrease your insulin sensitivity. They all work, but they all can kind of cause a vicious cycle too. And the main problem is you're eating too many carbohydrates. And over half of Americans really have a problem with insulin resistance, including me. You can even be lean and have an insulin resistance problem. And so you need to kind of look at that. That's why when I check labs, I always check an insulin level. When you check a sugar level, it may be normal. Even your 3-month sugar average, your hemoglobin A1C may be normal. But if you have a high insulin level, especially a fasting insulin level that's high, you're going to be a diabetic at some point in your life. And you're probably going to be obese also, or at least have a lot of belly fat. So the number one cause of heart disease, which is a major killer, is insulin resistance. It's really not the fat. So what do you do for your diet? If you take the carbs out, what do you put in? More protein? Well, moderate protein. If you put in too much protein, it turns to sugar. So you just need moderate protein. You don't need a ton of protein like a lot of people think. What do you need? More fat, more good fats. Fats taste good. They're more filling. They keep you full. And they're really twice as efficient in producing energy as protein or carbs. It's really the only macronutrient that keeps your insulin levels low. And like I said before, diabetes type 2 is all about the hormone insulin. Rules for eating: don't eat anything that says fat-free on it. Eat real food. You know what real food is. It doesn't come in a box or a package usually. Eat when you're hungry only. If you're not hungry, don't eat. And cut out grains, potatoes, and sugars. Yeah, I said grains. Cut out grains, whole grains. Whole grains are not good for most of us. Think about it. They're carbs. They're what causes weight gain. Use coconut flour, almond flour. There's a lot of good alternatives to using white flour or wheat flour, which is probably even worse. So the other thing about it too is that not only heart disease, insulin's pro-inflammatory. It causes inflammation in your body, and inflammation causes disease, especially heart disease and cancer. So why isn't low-carb eating the norm? Well, habits. We've been ingrained to eat low-fat for years. Carbohydrates are in most things. They give you a kind of a quick energy. And again, they used to think that fat caused heart disease. We know it doesn't. Plus, money's always involved. If you see a food advertised on TV, it usually means it's got a bunch of carbs in it. It's not real foods. If you see it advertised, you probably need to avoid it. And pharmaceuticals, they make billions off of drugs to treat diabetes. When really the way to treat diabetes is way cut your carbs down. I didn't say you had to go to zero or even get keto. That's another reason I really like intermittent fasting. It forces your body to chew up its own fat, not the fat that you get from eating, especially carbohydrates. So think about the root cause of type 2 diabetes, which is reversible, completely reversible, and that is carbohydrates. People are different. Everybody's different. Everybody has their own tolerance. But if you're overweight, especially if you have abdominal fat, if you're a diabetic or have been told you're a pre-diabetic, if you have hypoglycemia, which means you have too much insulin and it's bringing your sugars too far down, the opposite of diabetes, that means you're pre-diabetic and you've got a carbohydrate problem. So think about what you put in your mouth. Again, almost all my patients can lose weight in a couple ways. Lowered carbs and intermittent fasting. I like to figure out your metabolism, your hormones, and optimize your health. But think about if you're a type 2 diabetic, you have an insulin hormone problem. Come get analyzed, count your carbs, do intermittent fasting. We can help you cure your type 2 diabetes. So I hope to see you next week.